Now, without further ado, I want to turn it over to one of our key partners for the NICE Conference and Expo, Mr. Ed Adams. He is CEO of Security Innovations and has over 20 years of experience in the cybersecurity field. And more importantly, he has memorized every single line in the movie The Princess Bride. Ed, I turn it over.
Thank you very much, Randy. I appreciate that. Thank you all for joining. Just a quick word about myself and my company before I move on to talk about CyberRange's remote learning in the NICE framework, combining them for a winning workforce development program. I am a CEO of Security Innovation. That's my full-time day job. However, I also host a monthly talk show called Ed Talks. It's on various cybersecurity topics. I bring experts together. We've actually got one coming up next week on payment security. You can find info at edtalks.io. I'm also a board of director members for the International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals, rolls right off the tongue, ICMCP. And I'm also a research fellow at the Ponemon Institute. In my younger days, I was a mechanical engineer that built non-lethal weapon systems like that fast hardening foam out of a scuba tank you see on that the picture at the bottom left. But for the past 20 plus years, I've been in the software and cybersecurity world. Next slide, please. And during that time, Security Innovation we essentially help organizations secure the software that runs their enterprises and the teams that build, operate, and defend that software. We do that by offering a training platform through which we've trained over 3 million people in the last 10, 12 years. And we also have expert security assessments where we basically find security vulnerabilities in software and then teach the owners or operators of that software how to fix the vulnerabilities. We've literally tested software in satellites, dump trucks, Harley Davidsons, breathalyzers, and of course, a lot of web, mobile, and cloud applications. Next slide, please. But enough about me and Security Innovation. I'm here to talk about remote learning, CyberRanges, and the NICE framework. And I want to start by referencing a brand new research report that was just published by the Ponemon Institute. And it is called Cybersecurity Training Benchmarks. You can find it at the URL that's on your screen. And I'll make all these slides available to anyone that's interested after this session. And what the Ponemon Institute did is they analyzed 17 different elements of cybersecurity training programs. And they ranked each one of them utilizing something that's called SES, or the Security Effectiveness Score. That's a well-defined performance measurement tool that's been validated in more than 50 different independent studies since its creation. So if you go to the next slide, I list out the 17 different areas or elements that was analyzed. And it's grouped in 3 different buckets: governance and delivery, content, and measurement. Next slide, please. What was found in this research report is that there were 2 out of the 17 elements that were significantly more effective than the other 15. And the 2 most effective, which scored an 8.9 out of 10 on the SES, or Security Effectiveness Score, was 1, if training includes realistic simulation, and 2, if training has content that fits the learner's job role. So those 2 elements, realistic simulation and training tied to job role, if you utilize those in a cybersecurity training program, you will get the biggest return on your investment. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about CyberRanges. In the old days, which weren't too long ago, CyberRanges were very heavy, they were bulky, they were expensive, they had a lot of hardware and equipment, and there's a lot of configuration and setup that you had to do. Well, those days have really kind of changed with the advent of cloud computing, infrastructure as a service, and basically software running our world. Today's CyberRanges are lightweight. You can easily spin them up or down in a matter of minutes. They focus on modern technology stacks, web applications and databases and mobile and cloud infrastructure, and they're generally pretty lightweight. But best of all, they provide that real world simulated environment that is so critical to a successful cybersecurity training program. Next slide, please. Just a couple of benefits of cyber ranges. Most cyber ranges today will provide this real-time assessment. And that's really key, because that real-time assessment is what's going to provide you a measure of competency. That's really what you're looking for in any type of cybersecurity training program, is some kind of demonstration of competency. And cyber ranges, because they usually involve hands-on keys exercises, they are much more effective than something like computer-based training or instructor-led training, which tends to focus more on the content as opposed to the comprehension. It's much more about memorizing content. Cyber ranges, on the other hand, it's all about doing, it's performing. So I equate cyber ranges to kind of like a driving range for golfers, where you might get a lesson from a pro, which is equivalent to like computer-based training, but you don't actually know if you can hit the ball straight. So you actually go to the driving range and hit a real ball with a real club and see how you do. And that's kind of what cyber ranges are all about for the cybersecurity world. You are practicing in a safe sandbox. And we've heard a lot in the first 2.5 days of the conference about the cybersecurity skills shortage. Well, what you need to identify potential talent is intelligence. And that real-time assessment of security competency will give you that insight and intelligence to identify potential rock stars or cybersecurity professionals. But more importantly, it gives you the intelligence to tailor a training plan to address potential shortcomings or gaps, as opposed to trying to roll out a one-size-fits-all training program, which almost never works. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go, thank you. So we talked a little bit about what makes effective cybersecurity training programs. We've talked a little bit about today's cyber ranges. Now let's talk about remote learning. And in this year, this is the year of remote everything, right? It's a remote NICE conference, it's remote meetings, it's remote learning for school children as well as for professional adults. So what I did is I just took 6 key elements from a Forbes article that was written just a few months ago on tips to make remote learning more effective. And you can see those 6 that are up on the screen. I'll call out a couple of them that I feel are really important. And the first is interactive. And by interactive, this is all about learning by doing. This is where cyber ranges really come into effect and really shine. If you can practice and master an activity, that's where that's the knowledge retention that's going to stick with you. Focus on content and not comprehension. Again, you don't want folks to memorize necessarily. You want folks to demonstrate. You want them to prove the competency. And then the very last one here, which is synchronous and asynchronous, this is a concept called blended learning. And blended learning means you're using multiple modes of teaching, and you've got some guided lessons, whether it's pre-recorded videos or live instructor, as well as some self-paced exercises in labs. So that synchronous and asynchronous combination, again, is a tip to make remote learning more effective and knowledge retention higher. Next slide, please. Here's some data that was captured by participants who went through both computer-based training as well as cyber range activity. And as you can see, 98% of respondents either agreed or strongly disagreed that the combination of cyber range exercises with computer-based training maximized their knowledge retention and adoption. 98% is very, very significant. Okay, so we've talked about cyber ranges, we've talked about remote learning, we've talked about some best practices for cybersecurity training programs. Next slide, please. Now it's time to talk about the NICE framework. The NICE cybersecurity framework, you're at this conference because you either know about the NICE cybersecurity workforce framework or you're interested in learning more about it. I'm not going to spend much time talking about what the NICE cybersecurity workforce framework is, but I do want to call out one particular aspect of it, and that aspect is the work roles that are defined by the framework. The work roles are organized into those 7 specialty areas that you see: securely provision, operate and maintain, analyze, etc. But the best part about these work roles is that they define the knowledge, the skills, and abilities that are needed for each one of those job functions. They list common attributes that are sought, tasks that each job performs, and for some of them, there's even a table of capabilities indicators for entry level, intermediate, and advanced different levels. And those include industry certifications, education that is typical with those work roles, and both continuous and experiential learning recommendations for those job roles. So if you move to the next slide, we've got one more data point about the importance of that training that includes realistic simulation. This is from that same report from the Ponemon Institute, Cybersecurity Training Effectiveness. Training that included realistic simulation had a greater than 2 times return on investment than the average of the 17 elements. The average return on investment was about 14%. However, training that included realistic simulation returned 30% on investment, which is pretty significant. And you can see the quote from Dr. Ponemon right there on the screen, which I won't read for you. You can read it yourself. So next slide. This is the easiest puzzle we can possibly ever imagine. 3 highly complementary pieces coming together. Cyber ranges, the NICE framework, specifically the work roles out of the NICE framework, in remote learning, which is a must-do these days. Cyber range gives you that training with realistic simulation, the learn by doing. It's a great complement to something like computer-based training. The NICE framework has predefined work roles already for you in cybersecurity. I think there's over 40 that are predefined. So you can use those work roles to identify the knowledge, skills, and attributes that are needed for that work role. Then you can map those to your training program and deliver them through effective remote learning with the tips that we talked about just a few slides ago. So that's the idea, that's the combination. But you might be asking yourself, well, that sounds great, Ed. I can see where I can get all these work roles and the KSAs from the cybersecurity framework from NICE. There are plenty of vendors that offer some cyber ranges, but what about this, the rest of the training content? Well, if you go to the next slide, I provide a list of maybe 7 or 8 terrific training resources that are available, including some right from the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. The links are up there on the screen. The US Federal Trade Commission actually has some really good cybersecurity awareness training content. It's intended for small businesses, but it's applicable for everybody. On the more technical side, because I am in the IT world, I tend to work with software teams more so than other teams. The payment card industry, or PCI, Security Standards Council, has some good training programs. OWASP, which is the Open Web Application Security Project. They're very famous for their top 10 lists, the top 10 web threats, the top 10 mobile threats, the top 10 IoT threats. And my company, Security Innovation. Not only do we offer computer-based training and cyber ranges for software teams, but we also have a community site that has a lot of this content available for free. You can get to it by just hitting that URL, community.securityinnovation.com. And in fact, 2 days from now on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central Time, we are running a command and control cyber range capture the flag event. And the URL to sign up is right there on the screen, web.securityinnovation.com/CSNP-2020. It's a free event. You can sign up if you'd like to and experience what a modern software-based cyber range is all about. Next slide, please. But don't just listen to me. What I want to do in the next 10 minutes or so before I open up for a couple of questions is I want to walk through a couple of case studies, because hearing from me is great, but you really want to understand what some other organizations are doing that have been successful. So I'm going to start by talking about what Accenture did. And Accenture did this in 2019, so just last year. And they came to Security Innovation with the challenge. They actually wanted to train about 100,000 technical folks, basically software engineers, in a year. And if you've ever rolled out any type of training program, you know training 100,000 people in a year on pretty much anything is a monumental task. But Accenture wanted to train 100,000 people on secure software development, secure software operation, and cybersecurity. So they set a goal actually of just about 80,000, 77,350 was their specific goal. They had over 50 different job functions across 12 different countries. And of course, they had people on different maturity levels, either complete novices or folks that were already in an application security job function. So they built out a very aggressive but very thoughtful plan. And what they did is, starting with the nice work role frameworks, they were able to define 24 unique learning paths and have 3 different skill levels, very similar to a belt program in martial arts, white belt, red belt, black belt. And they coupled computer-based training with a practice area, which is command and control cyber range. So folks could put hands on keys after they've gone through training and demonstrate that they actually had learned what they professed to have learned, or had maybe they'd passed the exam in the computer-based training. They started with a pilot program, which is definitely a good practice when rolling out large training programs. They took feedback from that pilot program to tweak learning paths, make some adjustments, and then they had a lot of communication, whether it was emails, internal social media posts. They used posters in different offices, and they had scheduled prompts. So as someone was going through a learning path, if it was noted that they started a certain course but didn't finish, or it had been a week or 2 weeks since they had last been in the learning management system, they were proactively prompted. So Accenture, if you go to the next slide, you'll see what they actually got through is over 110,000 people that completed at least one learning path, whether it was level 1, level 2, or level 3. And for Accenture, goal setting here was really critical. There were 3 different times during the year when content was either refreshed or updated. So for example, you see by the end of July, there was a fresh set of content update that was coming. So Accenture had some communications to say, please make sure you complete your learning path by the end of July because we've got some fresh content coming. That was a big push. They also had a big push by the end of September because they wanted to make sure that they hit, there was some critical momentum that they wanted to build heading into the last few months of the year. And as you can see, the number of people that ended up enrolling on the training portal was over 125,000. And out of this 125,000, 110,000 completed a learning path. And in that 1 year period, Accenture actually consumed over 1 million hours of computer-based training and a number of different cyber range activities. So it was a huge success for Accenture. And this was just the beginning because cybersecurity training is not a one and done. It's an ongoing emerging field because you've always got new technologies. You've always got new emerging threats. You've always got folks that are entering jobs, leaving jobs, changing teams. So cybersecurity education is something that is continual. If you go to the next slide, I have another example of a company that successfully rolled out cybersecurity training for their software engineers, and this is Microsoft. Now, in this case, Microsoft, they wanted to have some hands-on exercises that were both competitive and fun, and their primary driver was to establish a baseline. So they could figure out if someone had acceptable level of competency or not. And Microsoft really has put together all of these kind of good practices that I've been talking about in the first 20 minutes or so. So they deploy blended learning. They have computer-based training plus cyber range exercises. They measure on every single cyber range exercise. The objective is for participants to score greater than 2,000 points. They use Security Innovations Command and Control cyber range for every single training activity, so that score is consistent. And once a person achieves over 2,000 points as a software engineer, they are deemed to be competent and don't require any additional training. The cyber range also has plenty of simulation. It's hands-on. Microsoft chooses to run a competition or a tournament style. So every single month, they actually will set a group of learners against each other, and it'll have a competition, and they give out prizes for who scored the first, the second, the third. And they do it every single month. It is that ongoing recurring training. It's not point in time. And what they found is that when someone started on a cyber range exercise, and then the following month went back and took that same cyber range exercise again, their score was increased by an average of 71%, which is pretty significant. Now, I did see a question come in from the audience. They asked, where was this case study and what LMS did they use? So I assume they're talking about the Accenture case study. And the learning management system that was used was called Absorb LMS. It's a company out of Calgary, I believe. But honestly, the learning management system is kind of irrelevant because it doesn't really matter what learning management system you use. It's really the best practices that we want to focus on here in terms of actually rolling out effective training programs. So let's roll down to the next slide. And the third and last case study, which is actually Citrix. And what Citrix does here is comparable to what Gartner recommends. Gartner just published this report in February of this year, 2020. Now, the report is titled 3 Steps to Integrate Security into DevOps. And as part of that, Gartner recommends rolling out a BELT program, very similar to what Accenture did in 2019, very comparable to what Citrix did a couple of years before that. So what Citrix did is they combined their BELT program with money and also promotion, HR eligibility. So once you achieved, either a purple belt or a brown belt, you're eligible to be promoted from, an engineer to a senior engineer, for example. And you also got bonuses for going through the cybersecurity training programs. Now, what Gartner recommends here is what you may be able to ascertain is a blended training program. They recommend training courses. They recommend competing in a CTF, which is a capture the flag. That's basically a cyber range exercise. And then they recommend some practical activities. So you've got the formal training, you've got the hands-on simulation training, and then you've got some on-the-job practice. That's what Gartner recommends. Again, that's the title of the report. I cannot send you the report, but if you do have a subscription to Gartner, you can get access to it yourself. Now, I've got a few minutes left, and what I do want to talk about on the next slide, or the next couple of slides actually, is how to get started. So here's a quick start step for you. Just 5 simple steps. First, assess your needs. Training needs analysis. You hear the phrase TNA used a lot. And this is where the NICE workforce development framework is so critically important. Identify which stakeholders you're looking to train, what are the roles that you're looking to train, what are the technologies that they're using, and with the combination of each one of those, you can define learning paths that are unique for the job role in the technology stack, which is exactly what the best practice is from a recommendation standpoint. And it's exactly what Microsoft did and Accenture did and Citrix did in their successful programs. Secondly, start off with a pilot. A pilot program, start small and then tweak it, take what you've learned from the pilot, make modifications either to the learning path or training modules, make those adjustments, make sure you're asking learners for feedback, because for some learners, that particular kind of training might not be effective or impactful. That's useful feedback. And once you've got that pilot down, you've made your adjustments, you've gotten the feedback from the learners, launch it, and reinforce it with lots and lots of communications. Frequent communications is really key. Next slide. Quick summary slide here. Mixed media or blended learning. That's definitely something that I can't really stress enough. Computer-based training, instructor-led training, they're terrific. They are fantastic for setting baselines and establishing some minimal level of understanding or knowledge. But that hands-on training that has simulation, again, from that research report from the Ponemon Institute, the most effective attribute of a cybersecurity training program is training that includes simulation. And equal to it is training that is tailored for the job role or the work role. Define learning milestones to make sure that goals are achievable. So that's, again, where learning paths can be very useful, or the belt system also can be very useful. You want folks to be encouraged. Ideally, you have folks that want to take training. I know that almost never happens, but the power of simulation and utilizing tools like cyber ranges can really help improve that engagement level, because they are fun, especially when you take advantage of things that are kind of hot and sexy, like hacking. Hacking is fun, and people love to hack websites and tear things apart. And that's what cyber ranges allow you to do in a very safe sandbox. So highly encourage it. Okay, last slide, please, which should be the next slide. That is my thank you slide. And also my contact info. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can hit me on Twitter at AppSec. Yes, I was on Twitter pretty early. Or you can email me. And of course, I invite you to attend next week's Ed Talks. You can register at edtalks.io. So I have 1 minute left, and I did get another question from the audience here. The question is, what was the ROI and how did they measure it? From Sid Chopra. So the ROI was measured, and I assume you're talking about the Ponemon research report. And the best thing to do is just get a copy of the report. So email me, I'll be happy to send it off to you. Dr. Ponemon always is very methodical about his methodologies, as well as all the demographics that he studied. This was a very, very comprehensive study. I think it went across 19 or 20 different countries, thousands of individuals. So I'll send you the report. Feel free to read it. As usual, Dr. Ponemon and team did a great job. So with that, Randy, I am right on time, just like all good software projects. Let me kick it over back to you.
Thank you so much, Ed, and